Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think gasoline looks like this. In the last episode of the GPZ Revival project, I overhauled the front suspension, got some fresh rubber on the wheels, took care of a few little things.
It was like a prolapsed anus.
And reinstalled the brakes that I rebuilt back in part 5. Since then, Roman commandeered the barn yet again to work on Fergie and push my stuff to the side. Classic.
The GPZ still needs new brake lines and a chain for me to actually ride it, but it kinda also needs a gas tank. I've been using the automotive IV drip, and this is a fantastic long-term solution if you don't want your vehicles to ever move.
The tank this bike came with is missing the filler cap, so the inside's been exposed to the elements for about 15 years. It also looks like someone's tried doing some body solder repairs to it, so I'm pretty confident that there's some issues. It doesn't look too bad inside though, but that's because what you're seeing is not metal, but a thick layer of dust and dirt. Taking a look at the fuel level sender is going to give us a better idea of how bad it actually is. If that's a rusty mess, the tank probably is too.
Okay.
Well, that's a rusty mess, so crap. And if that wasn't enough, there's also a crazy amount of hardware in here. It's pretty common practice when using liquid rust remover to also throw in loose metal and shake it around just to act as an abrasive, so this is a pretty clear sign that it is indeed bad. With my slipper still on for some reason, I hosed down the inside of the tank, shook things up a bit, and dumped out the dirt and water mixture. After a blast with a heat gun to dry it out, a look inside shows us that, yeah, it's nothing but rust. To see if there's also pinholes, which I can only assume there are, I set it upright to fill it back up with water, and yep, things are getting moist right where the attempted repairs are. Go ahead and call it, Doc. This tank is dead.
But if I'm being honest, I fully anticipated the tank would be bad because the previous owner told me it was when he handed me this replacement tank. But I'm not exactly happy to have this.
Beside it also being super rusty, it's actually for a 1988 ZX10, not this bike. So if I did want to use this, I would have to custom fabricate mounts for it and deal with rust, so no.
I hate fuel tanks. With all my heart. I went through 4 bad ones on the Fiero project, and I don't want to go through that pain again. So this time, rather than spending a decent amount of money on multiple possibly good gas tanks, I'm going to spend a lot of money once on a known good one.
I found one on one of the Facebook groups for this bike, and it's good quality, that's 99% rust-free, and is already the right color, so I snagged that up.
Ship time is estimated at 2 weeks, so it should be here 5 months ago. I bought it in August of last year. The guy I bought the tank from is in Mexico, and according to the tracking logs, the tank was seized at the US border. I filed a report with the shipping company to figure out why, and after many months they got back to me and they said it was because the box was emitting a foul odor and they're not going to push it through to the US. I'm not going to get the tank. And probably any other GPZ tank.
Rarely do you see these pop up for sale, and when you do, they're probably completely rusted out. So I might not get a proper GPZ tank for this bike, but I do have another option. 5 years ago, I replaced the dented tank on my old ZR7S with a better condition one, but I still have the original one lying around. And surprisingly, it's absolutely spotless inside. I mean, there's electrical tape or something in there, but literally zero rust. It may not fit the bike aesthetically, but if it'll fit physically, I'm gonna use this. Well, that's not the worst looking thing in the world. That title goes to you, Scott. But it doesn't fit. With it pushed all the way forward to clear the seat, the handlebars run right into it. And with it pushed back to where the handlebars won't hit it, the seat doesn't fit, and there's absolutely no way to install the petcock without activating SV cheats and turning on no clip.
I can't use this. And that means, and I really hate to say this, I gotta use the original rusty tank. But the only way that could work is if I get one of those kits where you pour it inside to coat the inside. And so I got one of those kits.
What I like about this kit in particular, which isn't too common among other brands, is that it's a two-part epoxy, meaning really strong molecular bonds and really high chemical resistance.
I've read a surplus of anecdotes online saying that Caswell is the only brand that truly lasts for gas tank liners, and I am very eager to put that to the test. But first, I've got to get rid of as much rust as possible in the tank.
Actually, that's second. First is removing the sheared off bolt. A little bit of center punching, drilling, and time with an easy out should hopefully do the trick.
Oh, it's coming out.
Can you tell I'm normally not so lucky with these?
I love it when these work. I really love it when these work.
All that hammering though unfortunately made a dent that's not gonna allow the petcock to seal. So to fix this, I'm gonna make my own slide hammer. I welded the right size metric bolt onto some all thread and threaded that into the nut. Now it's just a matter of locking down some washers and going crazy with the tube. It took a while, but with some extra hands to hold it steady, I got it there.
You okay?
It hurts my hands.
Oh yeah, that deserves an out-of-frame thumbs up for sure. So, to fill this with a de-rusting solution, I gotta block off these holes. To do that, I whipped up some little plates and cut out some gaskets. I added a few dabs of RTV to the petcock bolt since it has through holes to the inside, but the plate for the level center can just be bolted on normally. My poison today is gonna be electrolysis, removing rust with electricity. The tank will be connected to the negative side of a power supply, so there needs to be bare metal for that. And for the positive side, I need something to act as a sacrificial anode, like this big ass bolt I found. For this to work, it can't touch the tank, so I whipped up some spacers to raise it up. I started to fill up the tank, and also the vent tube, nice. But I remembered, oh yeah, there's pinholes, you ding dong. So I added some tape to the offending areas and went back to filling. Electrolysis basically works by breaking down rust particles via the passing of electrons from one piece of metal to another through an electrolytic solution. And this washing soda I'm adding to the water makes it just that. It's a slow process, but it's so inexpensive and free of harsh chemicals that it's almost always worth the overnight wait it needs.
Ew. That's pretty gross.
It's pretty gross at the top too.
Ah, jeez.
To see how clean we got it, I'm gonna go ahead and dump it out.
Oh, wait. Stop.
Oh, right. Thank you, Roman.
Yeah.
Thank you, Roman.
The surface is still almost completely covered in a layer of rust. Okay, let's set this up for one more round, and this time for 24 hours, and it's still pretty bad.
It's definitely better. It's definitely way better. It's not quite where I want it to be, though.
I guess when I have had great success with this in the past, it's been for surface rust. For full-on rotting metal, I'm thinking the tried and true method of sitting in acetic acid might be the move. It's a little more pricey than water in a box of powder, but it's very effective. And I do mean very effective. I let it sit for a few days and Roman sent me these pictures while I was away from the house. I came home ASAP and found what looks like the set for an alien chestburster scene. The tank is sitting outside and coming out of it, I can only describe as liquid death. This is the most vile thing I've ever seen in my life, and I've seen your mom. Yikes, that's a lot of pinholes. More than I expected, but also, all of the rust is gone. I mean, there's a few specks here and there, but this is good. Well, the bottom of the tank is. Because so much leaked out, the top is still rusty. So more vinegar and more waiting.
So the vinegar dissolved like the top layer of the concrete. It's not smooth anymore like it was. That is absolutely wild.
After a full day passed, I repeated the draining and rinsing process until the rust was gone and everything came out clear. Now to keep the rust from coming back, I coated the inside with OSPHO, also known as phosphoric acid. This neutralizes whatever rust is still there, but more importantly, it creates a protective layer on the raw steel. And I am very happy with this. That smells exactly like Auntie Anne's in the mall. It is exactly what that smells like. What the hell?
Now I will say that OSPHO shouldn't be necessary at all if you're going to apply the liner immediately after de-rusting. But I gotta do a few other things first.
I want to do some body work. And I know I said this project was just going to be the bare minimum to get it on the road safely and reliably, but if at some point I do want to fully restore this thing, and I don't, but if I do, I'd want to bring the tank back to bare metal to properly prep and paint it. If the epoxy liner was already applied, there might be an adverse reaction to the chemical stripper going on. And also, there's the dents. I need to pull those so I don't have half an inch thick layer of body filler. And the liner inside would shatter if it was already applied. It's more work for present me, but less work for a potential future me. After completely numbing my hands with the wire wheel and the drill, you might say, hey, that looks pretty good. But no, shut your mouth and grab me a cracker because this thing is Swiss cheese. How are all of these pinholes and big holes even hiding there? I'm happy I stripped this now because I had no idea it was this bad. The underside of the tank also got the same treatment, and it's more of the same. Fortunately, the epoxy liner is designed to fill any holes up to a couple millimeters in size, but the big boys are a problem. The only thing to do is make them bigger. But of course, this is gonna get filled with new steel. I found some scrap I had lying around that was the right thickness, cut it to shape, and welded it in. But I'm gonna warn you, it's not pretty. I should get a TIG welder, or maybe just practice with the MIG. Grinding it back definitely helped though. It's not perfect, but it is... oh shoot, what is the word?
Shitty. It's shitty.
The inside got the same repair treatment, as well as the front little corner piece. Now to get rid of the dents, I tacked on that DIY slide hammer from earlier and went to town. It pulled out nicely, but of course I burnt a hole in the tank when welding, so that got patched up too. I pulled the side dents out a little bit too far, causing the profile to be too convex, so I hammered that back a tiny bit. These will still need body filler, don't get me wrong, but nowhere near as much as before. The front lip was also a little out of shape, but a little bit of plier action took care of that. And the last thing to do is bend the mounting brackets back into position.
That's good enough.
So with all this taken care of, I can actually start the process of lining the tank. The instructions say to prep the inside by rinsing it with paint thinner and to try and kill as much grass as possible in the process. I dried out the whole thing with a leaf blower, then covered all of the holes with what is possibly the worst masking tape in the world. To make sure I didn't miss any, I shined an extremely bright flashlight inside and watched it light up. And we're good. Caswell has a wide range of color to choose from, and I went with a bright teal. Reason being, if it were to fail sometime down the line, and God I hope it doesn't, the bright colored chunks would stick out like a sore thumb either in the fuel filter or the carb bowls, just to be a great indicator if things go wrong. But mainly, it's just a lovely color. As for applying it, the instructions say to continue this rocking motion for 20 minutes and pour out the excess. But being concerned with all the holes that I have, I was at it for 50 minutes to make sure everything was used, not pouring any excess out.
It's very blue.
At this point, the epoxy is mostly plastic-like but not completely hard, so now is a good time to remove the block-off plates and cut back the excess. To fully cure, this needs to sit for 36 hours minimum at room temperature, and it's set to be well below that for the next few days, so it's gonna stay inside with me for a little bit.
Should've used the blue masking tape because this stuff sucks. God, this tape is awful.
After only half an hour of struggling with this stuff, I got it all off. And this looks great. Like an HD texture for Minecraft diamond ore. The larger spots here is just the epoxy oozing out past the small holes and pooling on the outside, so that's all good. And the pinholes have been completely filled in. Some do have little divots though, but they're good. This seems like a really solid repair. It's now essentially no different than a jerry can or a plastic gas tank on a dirt bike, it just now happens to have a steel outer casing.
Alright, so I want to make it so it's not just bare metal exposed everywhere, because that is just not gonna fare well at all. So I want to get this thing covered in epoxy primer ASAP. But before I do that, I want to take a look at this thing right here.
I probably should have addressed this before doing the tank liner, but this is a breather line that's in place to prevent a vacuum from being created when fuel flows out of the gas tank. The issue is that it's supposed to look like this so that I can attach a hose to it, but mine's rusted apart. I thought about cutting one off the ZX10 tank and welding or soldering it to mine, but someone might actually be able to get some use out of this, so I don't want to ruin it. But I found out that if I get some vacuum line and cut it at an angle to maximize the surface area and therefore the grip, it's actually on the little nub really tightly.
Alright, that is plenty good.
Alright, so prep for primer starts with a quick scuff and a wipe down with wax and grease remover. And now I just need to mask these sealing surfaces up, and to help with that, I've got some new parts. A bunch of stuff came in the mail, a new filler cap and petcock that are just cheap generic eBay parts since Kawasaki used them on so many models, and also a bunch of little goodies from Consolidated Motor Spares. CMS really helped out a lot in previous episodes, and they're here to save the day again. Thank you guys. But for now, I just need the petcock and the new level sender seal. With some masking tape applied, I can simply line up the parts and trace around them with a rusty razor. After finishing the petcock, the inside of the filler section was masked up too. I brought the tank out to my favorite card table that's never once let me down, and mixed up some Eastwood epoxy primer that I still had left over. This stuff is designed to be a direct-to-metal application, so etching primer isn't necessary. Just wanted to get stuff on there and protect it, I only laid down one very thick coat. And it came out pretty well. It almost makes me want to properly restore and finish the whole bike. Almost. After a couple hours, the primer flashed off enough for me to flip it over and to get one good coat on this side too. It probably would have been wiser of me to time this so I'm not painting in the dark, but luckily it all came out okay. While the primer is drying, or more accurately curing, over the next few days, I want to focus my attention on the fuel level sender. This is just a potentiometer, a variable resistor whose value changes relative to the rotation of this arm. But with the multimeter hooked up to it, I'm not getting any consistent readings, so it's not working right now. I gave it a little bath in the ultrasonic cleaner, and junk definitely came off as indicated by the now brown liquid, unless someone took a poop in here, but the measurements are still garbage. The next plan of attack is a vapor rest.
Oh.
After an hour sitting in there, we're actually seeing some proper steel color coming back, and we're actually getting some good measurements. 8 ohms, 104 ohms, 13 ohms, 106 ohms. So it's working way more consistently now. Holy crap, this thing might be okay. Alright, we're getting somewhere. To make sure it gets as clean as possible, I peeled back the little prongs and popped off the cover for the unit. That wire looks to be in great condition, oh my god. So I guess the potentiometer aspect of it is great. There's just still a lot of rust inside. But we can fix that. Well, I can fix that. You guys can't do anything because you aren't here in my barn. Unless you are and I just can't see you. Then pop these back into the Evaporest bath, this time putting it in the ultrasonic cleaner to really get things moving. That cleaned it incredibly well, but it might have been a little too much because the little contact that sweeps across the nichrome wire broke off the arm and now spins independently. Yeah, definitely the ultrasonic cleaner and not me off camera messing with it too harshly. But that's not a problem. I ran the arm over on the wire wheel to get it back to clean metal. Then with a little bit of flux and plumbing solder, I can securely reconnect it. The first dab flowed out very nicely, so to balance it out, I made the next one very ugly. But it's on there now and functioning exactly as it should. To protect the bare metal here, I clear coated the bottom of this since it'll be exposed when installed. And once that dried, gave the top section a few good spritzes with WD-40 to keep it from flash rusting before it goes back in the tank. Now the float is still garbage. It's swollen to the point where it can't fit through the hole it came out of. But what's mainly concerning is just how bad it's deteriorating. If I did manage to fit it in the hole, I'm not sure it would last long. Know what I'm saying, fellas? 3 years ago, when I replaced the broken level sender on the Fiero, I modified the aftermarket one so I could retain the original float arm. And because I'm a piece of shit hoarder who hasn't cleaned up a single thing from that project, I still have the new, unused float arm. So I can just use that here. It's almost perfect as is, but it doesn't fit through the hole either. But since this material is a closed cell foam, I can just run it along the bench grinder until it fits. But that was taking forever, so I stuck a wood screw through it, chucked it into a drill, and went to town with sandpaper. With no clearance issues now, all I have to do is break off the old float, slide on the new float in its little washer, and bend the end of the arm to lock it in place. I still need to find a way to plug it in though, since the connector here is long missing, and the corresponding one that was on the harness recently said, "We're done here." Holding the unit where it'll roughly be when installed, there's still plenty of slack in the wires, and that means I can cut them clean, strip them back, and install new bolt connectors. Now to do the same on the harness side. Now the proper thing to do would probably be replace the actual wires itself because it's really old and brittle. But I'm not exactly proper. With heat shrink over the cracks and new plugs crimped on, we can actually test this out on the bike because I still don't know if the gauge works. I'm gonna turn the key on, and nothing should happen because the float is in the all the way down position. If I move it up, yeah! Okay, so it's reading full when this is at the full mark. It should read halfway when I move this to about the halfway point. Oh, cool! We are good to go! Good to recover everything in tape, that is. We're not done yet. Now we are. I'm going to tuck it away. So this finished up and the primer completely cured at this point, we're ready to start putting everything back together. Unmasking the tape reveals some bits of gasket material still stuck to the surfaces though, so I carefully wire wheeled that back. And to protect the raw steel, I also applied a little more of the OSFO, maybe not super necessary since they'll be sealed up, but it can't hurt. While that's drying, I can install the new filler cap. One of the parts I got from CMS is a little seal that's supposed to go right here. However, it's not wanting to stay in place. So I whipped out some weather strip adhesive I had left over from the Fiero and slapped that little guy on. I popped the cap on top and secured the whole thing down with some brand new stainless steel bolts, except for one little bolt here that prevents someone from yanking the whole assembly unless they also have a key to open it. Sweet! Now for the bottom components. The last things to wrap up on the tank are the rubber mounts. The new ones for the front just slide on like this, but at the rear, we have a problem. Is the problem that the sheet metal of the bracket that the tank bolts up to is completely torn? Well, not the problem, but that is a problem. There we go. But no, the problem is that I only received these components here. Where in the heck is this? Nowhere. The answer is nowhere. CMS does not supply it, or any other manufacturer. The only reason I got the other little parts for the back is because they're just cylinders. They're generic parts that are used on so many different models. But the large main rubber mount for the gas tank is unique to this bike, meaning the demand to manufacture new might as well be zero. There are none from any supplier, and there's no used ones on eBay. But I'm not gonna let this lack of availability stop me from getting one. Hi. I have a really crazy idea that involves really powerful but surprisingly free software used in the visual effects world called F-Spy. It's a little out there at first, but bear with me. With this software, you can find the vanishing point of a photo by tracing some lines, and from there, the program figures out the position, rotation, and focal length of the camera used to take the photo. And with that data imported to software like Blender, the camera is digitally recreated in 3D space. And with the image set as the background, recreating the environment is as simple as lining up some edges, making some cuts, and extruding things out. And as a cherry on top, you can project the original image onto the model, perfectly recreating the world in 3D. And that's pretty much what the program is designed for. But what I'm interested in, and how all of this relates to the motorcycle project, is the 3D modeling simply by tracing an image aspect. So what if instead of using the interior of a room, I use the exterior of this part? So with the edges marked out in F-Spy and the data imported to Blender, I can just pull, cut, and extrude shapes until everything is lined up, and holy crap, I think Kawasaki might sue me for stealing from them. This is theoretically perfectly proportional to the actual part, but right now it is just some arbitrary size in 3D space. However, because I know what the center-to-center distance of the cylindrical feature should be because of the tank, I can just load the model into Fusion 360 and scale it to that measurement. Now obviously it doesn't have to be brought into different software to change the scale, but I'm going to be remodeling the whole thing in CAD just because it's friendlier software for designing for manufacturing. After a little bit of 3D tracing, this thing is almost ready to be printed off, but to give me a fighting chance of having it fit the first time around, I drew up this diagram and reached out to that same Facebook group from earlier to see if anyone could help me lock in what I think are some pretty critical dimensions. And Joe, a freaking legend, gets back to me almost immediately with everything I need. And after a few minutes of adjusting those dimensions and some time spent with the 3D printer, we have this. It fits perfectly in the gas tank side of things. Thank you again, Joe. So that's awesome, but on the bracket side, not so much. There seems to be 4 areas of issue. The cutout in the back isn't tall enough, which causes it to sit too high. The angle of the sloping part is a little too obtuse, causing it to wobble instead of locking in place. The 2 little feet on the edges aren't wide enough to clear the sheet metal, and the sharp edge right here won't clear the radius in the bend. So I just need to apply those changes to the model, reuse the same 3D printer footage from earlier, and we should be good to go. Oh, that's beautiful. Oh, that is absolutely perfect. It's fully seated, and everything lines up exactly as it's supposed to. So with this squared away, the bracket is good to go back on the bike, and the 3D printed part is ready to go in the trash. As great as this part fits, this little brittle plastic piece was never going to be used to support an entire gas tank.
Now I could reprint the whole thing in a flexible material like TPU or nylon, but another option is to not print the part at all. So what I did was 3D print everything but the part. I made a mold.
That's right. I'm gonna cast my own rubber piece, just like OEM. I spent some time in Fusion 360 modeling these up and printed them off again on JankBot.
Now, a lot of the time when you make molds of stuff, you make a master, then make a mold of the master, and then cast a copy from that mold. But also, you can just start with the mold. I've made many molds and cast many copies of things in my life, going back to when I was like 12 and 13 years old with Halo armor. But this is the first time I've done anything like this. I've seen it done a few times on Reddit and different forums, as well as on YouTube on the Easy Composites channel. So I know it can be done. I just want to do it. As far as the mold itself, I made it so it goes together like such. And there are 2 ports on the top, one to fill and one to act as a breather to displace the air as you're adding in the rubber. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Let's get to casting.
The process starts off by applying a couple coats of mold release spray. What I'll be casting into this is urethane rubber, specifically Vitaflex 60 from Smooth On. I have no idea how well it'll hold up long term since it's designed to be a mold material, not necessarily a finished part, but I have seen people use this for making their own custom bushings for suspension and engine mounts, so it's probably going to be okay. Because this mold is a raw 3D print with no post-processing done to smooth it out, I applied a little bit of petroleum jelly on the sections where the 2 halves meet up, just to ensure a good seal between them. I attempted to stick some tape around the outside, then I remembered, oh yeah, you just sprayed it with an anti-stick solution. So I wiped that off with a solvent and applied more tape. And now it's just a matter of thoroughly mixing up the urethane and pouring it in.
Yeah, that's not gonna work too well, is it?
No, it's not, but hold on.
Got a little baby syringe.
That should work.
Nice.
Once it started to overflow, I finger tapped my life away to remove any air bubbles and added some more when the level went down. And now we just wait.
Okay. It's hard now. Definitely squishy enough, but not super soft.
I designed the mold to have a little chamfer in it so I could easily wedge it apart, but it was still very much a struggle.
Ow. Ow. Oh. It's so weird. It feels like a proper rubber part.
Psst, that's because it is.
Oh my god, that is wild. That is absolutely wild.
It really feels OEM though. And after cutting away the flashing, it almost looks that way too. There are a couple voids in the back edge where there were bubbles that I couldn't get out, but none that impact the functionality. I will say that it's not an exact copy of the original because I didn't add the holes in the bottom here. They were probably only there for material savings, so because of that, and because I would have had to make a more complex 3-piece mold to replicate them, I just didn't bother. But for a proof of concept of making a direct copy of something from an image online in a few measurements, this ain't bad at all. The parts all fit up beautifully together on the tank, and on the bike, even more so.
Oh no, that's good. That's better than good, that's fantastic. Guys, this is so freaking cool.
Ladies and gents, that right there is a fully repaired gas tank, properly mounted.
I mean, this feels the exact same as it did like when I first got the bike around and I put a tank on top. But it's gray now, and also it'll hold gas. Still need to test that actually.
Right, I should probably make sure the tank can do what it's supposed to do. Now, it probably would have been smart of me to do the leak down test on the gas tank before I spent all the time and materials covering it in epoxy primer. But I'm not that smart. But I am smart enough to do it off the bike. If it does leak, I don't want it coming out all over everything. But also not smart enough to do it with water. That way, in the event that it does leak, I wouldn't be 1, wasting fuel, and 2, creating a fire hazard in the process. But I guess fully trusting this paid off because there were absolutely no leaks. Not a single drop came out. So let's get this thing on the bike. With some vacuum hose, fuel filter, and a positive attitude, it's just a matter of cutting everything to length, test fitting, making a few adjustments if there's some kinks, forgetting to reinstall a filter after bolting the tank up, adding on the breather hose, and plugging in the fuel level sender. Now the engine and carburetors have been sitting for months now, so let's see how this goes. Alright, first fire up with the gas tank properly installed under my ownership. Alright. Well, I guess this wraps up this gas tank odyssey. It is admittedly very ugly still, but the groundwork to properly finish it is laid out before me if I choose to do so in the future. But more importantly, the bike is no longer on life support tethered to the C-stand. The only thing stopping it from moving out of the barn and onto the road now is the lack of chain and the still present old brake lines. Guess I better go take care of those. So, until next time, I'll see you guys later.